Good morning. Welcome to this gathering. Here we are, another Sunday morning, and we gather here as a community of people seeking spirit, seeking community, seeking wisdom, and we do so in this room that is a safe space for all, no matter who you are. We gather in this building that occupies so much activity through the week and that now welcomes us into the warmth of this morning. And we gather too on this land that reminds us of who we are. Treaty 6 people who seek to live in relationship, in reconciliation, and in partnership with all the inhabitants of this land, past, present, and future. This is a place of belonging where we gather with gratitude for where we are, for who we are, and perhaps most importantly, for who we will yet become. Let's seek wisdom and seek truth this morning and sing our way fully into this circle with each other this morning.
Light doesn't always come easily. Each new day, our eyes open to light. And sometimes its brightness hurts our eyes. Sometimes it brings things into focus. Sometimes we see only the shadows. Sometimes it brings clarity. When we gather with each other today, we gather in the midst of all that is illuminated for us, all the pain and joy of living. And we come with each other in this light, seeking the warmth of love, seeking the strength of hope that we may live in the light of a new day with deep integrity, with great joy, and with gratitude. And so we come with our words to ground and center us in this time and in this place. Together we will make a thought So I invite you to share these words in response to complete each of the thoughts that I begin with us. Here in this most ordinary time and place, here amid the turning from summer to autumn, in the midst of all that disturbs us, in the midst of all that needs us to disturb it, in the midst of all we dare to love, and in the midst of all we dare to grieve, as we sing and pray and reflect together. We strengthen our intentions in a prayer patterned after the prayer the gospel stories give us, a story of a group of friends asking their teacher to teach them to pray. In the words of Bob Hetherington in Modern Images, the cadences of the prayer of Jesus. We strengthen our intention to live more nearly as we pray, as we offer these words together. We open to the sacredness at the heart of all, called by many names. We open to the deep mystery we trust to be love. May we be faithful to the vision of building a beloved community on earth, that there be daily bread to nourish all hunger, forgiveness for the harm we have done, and the capacity to forgive those who hurt us. May we not feel abandoned in hard times, but find the strength to meet each moment and the wisdom to walk in the light of deep gratitude. For the light of love is with us now and forever. Amen.
It's our time for all ages. I hate to interrupt coloring, but if you want to come to the carpet and have a little conversation and do a little something with me, come on forward. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good morning, everyone. I want to tell you a story. And as I tell you this story, there's no book and there's no pictures. And I like to have something to help tell the story. So without a book and without pictures, the next best thing is Lego. So I'm going to use this Lego to help us to tell this story. Okay. So there were once two friends, and they got in a little bit of an argument. They disagreed on something. It wasn't that important of a something, but it felt like it at the time. So they had a fight. They disagreed. Maybe they yelled a little. And they got angry. These things happen with friends. Now, this little argument that they had, it made them feel very bumpy. It made them feel like things were kind of rough, not smooth, not fun, not easy, but difficult. And that's too bad when that happens. And so, I need to dump this. Okay, there we go. And so they decided that they were just going to carry on. They were just going to keep doing stuff. They were going to keep having, times where they played together. And so, no, thank you. I'm going to do that. It's really crazy of me to bring Duplo and Lego and not let you play with it. How rude of me. But So they built things together and they did things with each other, but they always felt like that rough patch, that difficult part, was getting in the way. So, they built, they played with each other. They played with each other, and I'm going to build a house. Do you see what I'm doing up there?
Yeah.
You can see it. Oh yeah, this is pretty fun. So this is so everyone can see what I'm doing here. Kids, look. Look what I'm doing. Liam, look. Look right here. So they kept doing stuff, and they kept building, and they kept playing with each other. But as they did, they realized that something was wrong. Do you know what's wrong with my Lego? Look at it. What's wrong with my Lego? There's cracks. Why are there cracks?
Because it's way too dirty.
What happened at the very bottom? Do you see it? What happened?
There's a tiny window.
Oh yeah, there's cracks. There's holes. Why is there holes in my house? Well, they did fight. You're right. And there's kind of a hole in their relationship. There's a hole in their friendship. But in terms of Lego, do you see my green bottom, my bases of my Lego?
Yes, I do.
What's wrong with them? It is Duplo. You're right. Thank you for that. Yes. And so what's wrong with the bases? Do you see? Can you see? What's wrong?
We put another piece underneath.
Yeah, they're totally not even, right? They're not flat. There's a big bump there on the base. So when they started building up everything else got crooked. So there's cracks. Well, how are we going to fix those cracks? We could push down really hard. It's not working.
Like a knife.
Could we put some goop in there? Wait, I brought some toothpaste. Could I fill this crack with toothpaste?
No.
Should I? That would make a big mess. I could.
Yes.
Now, what would happen to our house if I put the toothpaste in there? Could we just carry on and keep building? Would it even everything out? Or would the toothpaste just eventually squish and be gross? It would be gross. And then you'd have toothpaste all over your hands, and we couldn't really play with this anymore. So, the two friends decided, oops, there goes my Duplo. Oh, thank you. The two friends decided,
To eat the space of paper.
thank you, Liam, let's listen.
Here's a friend in the house.
Thank you very much. The two friends decided that they couldn't,
I can make two
I'm
friends.
losing control. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Great. Perfect. You do that. And I'm going to just carry on here because the two friends decided they couldn't carry on. They had to go back and talk about what happened. Thank you.
I made a person.
They had to talk about the fight they had. And when they talked about the fight they had, they were able to say, you know what? We hurt each other. We hurt each other's feelings. And it wasn't very smart of us to keep those feelings and to not talk about all the rights and all the wrongs of that. Liam, good. So they went back and they talked. And it's just like having to unbuild our house. Do you know, sometimes for peace to happen, we have to take things apart, not just build things. So we have to figure out what the problem was. The problem was our base. It wasn't even.
Now it's even.
Now it's even, and now, I bet you when we build our house, it'll be much stronger.
I hope.
Yeah, you can help. There will not be any gaps or holes. We won't need toothpaste.
Make a guy.
Great.
Oh, I know the picture.
Okay. Well, we only have a few pieces. There, that's perfect. That could go there. That's okay. All right. Thank you.
I can make a person.
All right. Lego time is done. Great. Thank you. Yay, we did it. We built a house with no cracks. Woohoo! We did it. What I want you to learn... Thank you. I'll do that. I'll do that later. Thank you. What I want you to learn... Thank you. What I want you to learn is that sometimes, to make peace, we have to take apart the things that are bumpy, the things that are not peaceful, the things that are difficult, so that we can build relationships from the ground that are peaceful and right and good.
for the last number of months in spirit and in the news, and for many who've been able to gather in North Dakota with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. We have listened and we have learned as they have fiercely raised their voices for their land and their water. This is a little sense of what stands behind their protest, what stands behind the headlines.
We're not protesters, we're water protectors.
We are indigenous. We have been here since time immemorial.
We are not protesters.
I'm not violent.
We are protectors.
The term protesters is a colonized term for standing up for what's right.
We're out here protecting this land because it's everything to us.
Because it would be a continuation of the policies towards Native people, which is destruction of land, destruction of water.
The Dakota Access Pipeline wants to think that this is business as usual.
It's not just about Native people, but it's about the 18 million people that depend on the Missouri River and that are downstream from us as well.
This isn't a pipeline. This is fossil fuel infrastructure for profits, not for the people.
You can't guarantee that this pipeline's not going to break. You can't guarantee any of that.
And we have to help stop it. It jeopardizes too many people's water.
This disrespect to our spirituality.
Our language is founded upon the land.
What we are trying to say is that America, this is a wake-up call.
It's just a part of the extractive economy, and it's a part of another aspect of the violence that we as Indigenous peoples have been experiencing for over 500 years.
This is a message from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe that challenges us. From writings that have been passed down to us from the first century, from a gospel written some 50 years or more after the death of Jesus of Nazareth, we have this story. Jesus left the place where he was, and he went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. When a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Help me. My daughter is terribly ill." But he didn't answer her at all. And his disciples came and they urged him and they said, "Send her away because she keeps shouting at us." And he answered, "I came only to those who belong to the house of Israel." But she came and she knelt before him and she said, "Teacher, help me." But he answered, "It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." And she said, "But even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Jesus was moved by her, and he said, "Let it be done for you as you have asked." And her daughter became well. This is a story that disturbs some of our assumptions about the one, the teacher we call Jesus of Nazareth. We value being able to control disturbances, even being free of some disturbances. We built that feature into our cell phones. We can use various settings in the Do Not Disturb menu to avoid intrusions we don't want. We can restrict the times that we don't want to receive calls or the people that we don't want to get calls from. Hotel rooms have supplied us with those very friendly Do Not Disturb signs to hang on the door to discourage anyone from knocking on our door. In fact, in Canadian society, we've made it a criminal offense to disturb the peace. And we've defined that crime to mean a person who's outside a dwelling place who causes a disturbance by fighting, or screaming, or shouting, or swearing, or singing, or using insulting or obscene language. It's always seemed a little ironic to me that if you scream or shout or swear or sing inside an apartment or a house, apparently no one's peace is disturbed. So in this ancient story that I just read a moment ago, by our legal standards, that anonymous woman would be committing a crime. She's outside and she's shouting and screaming at Jesus of Nazareth and his friends. And first, he ignores her. And then he insults her. In fact, he appears to only acknowledge her because his friends have pleaded with him to get her to stop shouting. In the two versions of this story as we have it, Jesus fails to do everything he taught his followers to do. Worse than that, actually, he does the opposite of what he taught his followers to do. He doesn't just fail to love the enemy. He was hateful. He didn't just refuse to help her, he called her a dog. A racial slur that belied the hatred and the contempt for the one who is the other. He's speaking to a Gentile woman the way every other good Orthodox Jewish boy in the first century would talk about her behind her back. She's a dog, a scavenger, a nuisance, a less than human creature who has no place under the table, let alone a place at the table. But surely there must have been more to this conversation than a quip back and forth. It must have taken more than just winning the metaphor war for her to change his mind. There had to have been more than these one-liners in retort, like, she said, would you help my daughter? And he said, whatever bread I have is for the children of Israel, not the dogs of Syria. To which she said, okay, then just give me the crumbs, for surely the scavengers get the scraps. What are we missing in this story? What part of this conversation are we not getting to hear? It feels like we got the Coles Notes version, and surely the communities for both which Matthew and earlier Mark stitched together with these stories were dealing themselves 50 years after the death of Jesus with exactly the Gentile problem. The question of how Jewish do you need to be a follower of Jesus of Nazareth? Doesn't it sound a little familiar? How much doctrine that has been developed around the Jesus way do you have to believe to be a Christian? Isn't that the 21st century version of that question? But surely, those to whom this story was originally told needed to hear this story alongside all the others they heard about Jesus. And I wonder if there isn't a clue into how much of a them the storytellers took pains to suggest that she was. Between the two versions of the story we have, she has 4 strikes against her. By gender, she's a woman in first century Middle Eastern culture. By race, she's a Gentile on Jewish territory. By nationality, she's a Syrian. By religion, she's a Canaanite, a pagan. Those enemies whom Jesus' ancestors killed and displaced and dominated in their quest for the conquest of Canaan to build themselves a homeland. 4 ways to Sunday they take pains to tell us she's the other. She's the outsider. She's the not them. In this story, the one that our tradition honors as the great wisdom teacher is not the teacher. At best, he's a reluctant student. And she is a dedicated and desperate mother turned instructor who somehow manages to take down his do not disturb sign. The one he'd hung on his heart and his mind. She managed to disturb his tidy, peaceful self-understanding. His neat little paradigm of orthodox and unorthodox, of divinely chosen people and the rest of them, of the what's this got to do with me? And this has everything to do with me. To provoke him to act and to care like it was his own child at stake. She must have told him something that disturbed him enough to open the door of his heart. That helped him feel her pain as though it were his own. That helped him see this child and her desperate mother like he could see his own mother. That melted the degrees of separation between them and caused him to see that his humanity depended on her humanity. She doesn't just disturb his thinking. Somehow, and the story doesn't tell us how, his encounter with her changed his heart. And as later stories would suggest, he somehow manages to move beyond the Gentile as the issue and moves beyond the differences in gender and geography and race and in religion, and he evolves beyond his own socialization, transcending his own narrow and rigid thought and behavior. In the world of the stories, he's changed forever by his encounter with this woman. Maybe the first generation of his followers needed to hear this transformation in their leader as much as we do. Maybe they needed to see that the best of teachers are also the best of students. And that Canaanite women, in a myriad of forms, shout at us every day, inviting us to open and evolve and change in ways that we couldn't do it without them. And maybe we get this story because we need its wisdom. Maybe it didn't get dropped because it makes Jesus look so bad. Because its early listeners, like us, needed its truth. That it always seems to take an unwelcome intrusion into our tiny little realities to push us through another birth canal in our ever-evolving journey of becoming truly human. Was this not a quantum leap for Jesus of Nazareth in his own spiritual development? He had those do not disturb settings on his heart and on his mind, just like we do. We recognize them because we all have them. We have those parts of us that don't want to be confused with the facts because we have made up our mind. We have those things we don't want to be confronted with because they are too painful to see and too painful to hear. And it's always disturbing to have our opinions, our ideas, our beliefs challenged. We generally don't easily welcome those experiences, those ideas, those individuals who challenge our assumptions and disturb our peace. There are so many brave Canaanite women in the world fighting for their children's lives. They are men and women. They're of diverse religions and spiritualities, diverse cultures and languages, and they are disturbing the peace for a better world for their children. They're fighting to be considered in the decisions that affect the health and welfare of the planet and its peoples and its creatures, to have a voice in structuring relationships and economics and healthcare, to be included, to be considered, to matter enough to warrant protection. There's so many who work in so many ways to disturb our peace, to disrupt our paradigm, to get our attention, to stretch us beyond the limits of what we see and know and hear and believe. We've met some of those Canaanite women in North Dakota. In the indigenous men, women, and youth who protest the Dakota Access Pipeline crossing the Missouri River, not once, not twice, 4 times. And who've been joined by young and old from across the continent, in fact, around the world. They invite us to face in ourselves that same evolutionary crisis Jesus of Nazareth faced when his peace was disturbed, exploding his worldview and forcing him to a new truth. Are we not faced with an evolutionary challenge to evolve in our capacity for empathy, our capacity for inclusion, or we risk extinction? Our contemporary Canaanite women are not primarily protesters. They're protectors, defending what they love deeply. Disturbing the peace because they're disturbed by the inequities and the unfairness and the injustice. Disturbing the peace in an attempt to find the things that make for peace, which are surely things like love and truth and respect and justice and inclusion. Just imagine what our economics would look like if empathy was our first principle. Imagine what our religions would be like if acts of empathy were our shared spiritual practices instead of prescribed prayers or defined and dogmatic beliefs. Imagine what our nations would look like if we pledged empathy to each other instead of allegiance to a flag or a monarch. Imagine what our business practices would look like if they were guided by empathy for our air and our water and our soil and our animals and our fellow creatures, human and more than human, rather than being governed by what makes the most money. And imagine what our global relationships could be like if at the end of our great enlightenment we were actually to evolve into our deep empathy. In small ways, it happens every day. And every now and then it happens on a scale we couldn't have imagined. It happens in a small way every time an Israeli heart is broken open by the death of a Palestinian prisoner. And every time a Palestinian heart is broken open by the death of an Israeli soldier. It happens whenever we get ourselves inside the shoes and the sandals and the skins of another and we feel and hear and see as though we were them. It happened in small acts like those this week when almost 1,000 people, regardless of their theology or ideology, chose to express solidarity with Greta Vosper and with the congregation of West Hill United Church by seeking dialogue over discipline, by fighting for diversity over dogma, by seeking inclusion instead of expulsion from the spiritual community that had been home for some for a lifetime. And it happens when young and old, settler and indigenous stand together to be the voice of the river and the air and the land, which they understand to be under threat. It happens whenever and wherever we are moved to disturb the peace for a greater justice. This story about Jesus embarrasses us. The behavior of the hero of our tradition is hardly something in the story we want to emulate. But I'm grateful for this story. Because we all get it wrong sometimes. Our assumptions, our illusions, our prejudices, our preconceived ideas get in the way. And what I love about this story is its capacity to suggest a remarkable evolution of empathy. Perhaps that on which our species' very survival depends. And to those who would want to answer every question with, what would Jesus do? Maybe the best answer is, if the stories we have are any indication, he'd evolve. He'd change. He'd learn from his mistakes. He'd let his illusions be shattered. He'd let his assumptions be questioned. He'd be opened by life. He'd have his peace disturbed and he'd never be the same again. So how about us? What's disturbing our peace? And what do we need to disturb? Our peace is disturbed by many things, some beyond our control. Things like disease, death. Our peace is disturbed by injustice, by poverty and hunger. We gather up all those disturbances that we hold within us, those things that nudge us to be disturbers. And in our many voices and in one spirit, and in solidarity with the people of West Hill United Church, we offer this prayer they pray each time they gather in Scarborough, Ontario, a prayer that echoes the voice and the wisdom of the prayer of St. Francis. And together, we offer these words as our prayer this day. As I live every day, I want to be a channel for peace. May I bring love where there is hatred, and healing where there is hurt, joy where there is sadness, and hope where there is fear. I pray that I may always try to understand and comfort other people, as well as seeking comfort and understanding from them. Wherever possible, may I choose to be a light in the darkness, a help in times of need, and a caring, honest friend. And may justice, kindness, and peace flow from my heart forever. Amen. We go in the light of love, that those who are seeking scraps under the table will find a place at the table, because we will make a place at the table. We go in the light of joy, hope, and peace. We go together. We go with one another into all that is sacred, to be the change that we would seek in the world. We take our light to that end.